Walk into any pharmacy and find the aisle for tired legs. Horse chestnut capsules, rutin tablets, a gadget that squeezes your calves, all of it sold for the aching, heavy, swollen legs you drag home at the end of a day. Your grandmother had a pot for that on the stove, and for every other kind of leg trouble too. The swelling, the ropey veins, the cramps, the feet that went cold and dead in winter, the gouty toe that would not let her sleep. She never paid a supplement company a cent. Here is the part your doctor may never tell you. Some of the old drinks she made contained plants that could affect blood vessels and circulation in the legs. The modern shelf gave them new names, new bottles, and new prices. Stay for number 2, the roadside weed a chemist turned into a blood thinner, and number 1, the poison nut the children played with in the yard. Subscribe if you keep the old knowledge alive. Number 15, the St. John's wort. When a shooting pain ran from the hip down the back of the leg, the misery the old people called sciatica, your grandmother reached for the little yellow flowers of this weed, gathered at midsummer. She steeped them, and she also crushed them into a red oil to rub along the burning nerve. Honesty. First, because this is a name you know. Most of the real relief came from the oil rubbed on the leg, not the cup, and the plant is a troublemaker inside you. It stirs up the sun on your skin, and it quarrels with a long list of modern medicines, so it was never as gentle as its pretty flower looked. Still, when the nerve down her leg caught fire, this is the plant she trusted to cool it. We start with the honest one, so you can trust the rest. Number 14, the beet. Your grandmother poured the deep red juice, told you it would build your blood, and pointed at the color as the proof. Red drink, red blood, strong legs. On that count, she was mostly wrong. There is barely any iron in a beet, and it does not build the blood the way she meant it. But hold on, because she was right by accident, and the reason is remarkable. The body takes the natural nitrates packed into that beet and turns them step by step into a tiny messenger gas that tells the blood vessels to relax and open wide. More room, more flow, all the way down into legs that had gone tired and sluggish. It is one of the few things on this whole list with hard modern science behind it for pushing blood into weary legs. She had the wrong reason and the right glass. The ruby drink at supper was doing something real, just nothing to do with its color. Number 13, the black cohosh. Your great-grandmother knew this tall American woodland flower by rougher names, black snake root among them, and she simmered its knotted root when a rheumatic ache settled deep in the legs or when sciatica gripped the hip and thigh. It was a genuine home remedy in this country a century and a half ago, carried into the settlers' kitchens from Native American medicine. The root does hold something that calms inflamed, aching muscle and nerve, but it earns a real caution, and honesty demands it. In rare cases, black cohosh has been tied to injury of the liver, so it was never a tea to drink daily for months on end. Taken with care for a bad rheumatic spell in the legs, though, it was one of the old country's most trusted roots. She reached for it when the ache went bone deep and nothing else would touch it. I can only bring you a handful of these remedies at a time, but I gathered all the ones I could find, over 100 remedies, into a single ebook, written down the way my family kept them. If you want the whole collection, scan the code on your screen, or the link is waiting in the description. Now, let's get back to it. Number 12, the bog bean. Out in the wet ground and the peat bogs grew a 3-leafed plant with a bitter, bitter leaf, and your great-grandmother gathered it for the rheumatism that stiffened and ached in the legs. She dried the leaves and steeped them into a tea so bitter it made you wince, because the old wisdom held that the bitterer the cup, the better it worked on aching joints and heavy rheumatic legs. It was a bracing spring tonic and a remedy for the sore, stiff limbs of people who worked hard out in the damp and the cold. The honest truth is that its powers were broad and gentle rather than sharp, more comfort than cure. But when her legs ached with the rheumatism after a long wet winter, the bitter bog tea was what she set on the stove. She trusted the bitterness to do the work. Number 11, the stone root. Deep in the woods, your grandfather dug a hard, stony root that the old Appalachian herb doctors swore by, for legs gone ropey and knotted with swollen veins. He steeped it slow, and he drank it for the varicose veins that stood up blue and aching on a body that had spent its life on its feet. The root works quietly on the sluggish, pooling blood in the legs, coaxing it to move back up the way it should. Honesty, though. This was always a slow and stubborn remedy, taken over weeks, and its stronger fame was for other troubles below the belt, so a viewer will not have heard of it. But among the mountain people who knew their plants, when the leg veins bulged and ached, this quiet woodland root was the cup they trusted to ease them. It asked for patience, and it gave it back slowly. Notice what none of these did. Not one opened a blocked vein, or dissolved a clot, or cured a ruined valve. That was never the promise, and it should not be now. Aching, heavy, cramping legs at the end of a long day are one thing. A leg that turns hot or swells on its own, or a pain that will not settle, is a message for a doctor, not a teapot. What these drinks did was gentler than the old miracle talk. They eased the feeling of tired, heavy, aching legs. Everything still coming rests on that difference. Number 10, the ash leaf tea. When the gout struck the foot like a hot nail and the rheumatism seized the knees, your great-grandmother stripped the leaves from the ash tree by the lane, dried them, and steeped them into a plain green tea. This was no folk whisper. In the old country, the peasants swore by it to chase the pains out of their feet and legs, and last century a doctor with gout in his own foot wrote up how the ash leaf tea kept his attacks away for years. The leaf carries compounds that quiet the fire of gout and rheumatism where it lands, and it settles the swelling too. It is gentle, and the honest word is that it worked slowly and steadily rather than overnight. But for a foot throbbing with gout, or a knee stiff with rheumatism, the leaves off the common ash were a free and trusted cup. The tree grew right there by the road. Number 9, the prickly ash bark. On the tongue it was the toothache tree, because a chip of the bark numbed a sore gum, but your grandfather kept it for the legs. He chewed it, or he steeped it into a tea when his feet and legs went cold and dead in the deep of winter, because it lit a slow warmth that spread out to the frozen edges of him. The old country doctors used it the way they used cayenne, only slower and longer, to drive the blood down into cold, sluggish feet. This was not a fringe cure. The dried bark sat in the official United States drug list, the national formulary, printed there as real medicine until 1947, and then it quietly fell off the page. A lifetime later, there is no warming bark in the cabinet, only a heating pad with a cord and a price. The tree still grows where it always did. We simply stopped reaching for it. Number 8, the Angelica root. In the cold north of Europe, in Norway and Lapland, and the villages your great-grandparents left behind, Angelica was the great warming root, brewed into a tea to drive the blood out to cold hands and feet and to carry a body through the long, dark winter. It crossed the ocean in the immigrants' trunks and stayed in their kitchens for the feet and legs that never warmed. The root truly does open the vessels at the cold edges of the body, but it carries hard warnings, and honesty demands them. It makes the skin burn easily in the sun, it thins the blood and must never be mixed with a blood thinner, and it has deadly cousins in the wild, hemlock among them, so it was never a plant to gather on a guess. Known by someone who knew it, it was winter warmth in a cup. A grandmother who carried it across an ocean knew exactly which root she had dug. Number 7, the autumn crocus. This one is a warning as much as a remedy, so hear the whole of it. Your grandmother knew this pale purple flower as a poison first and a medicine second. When gout set the big toe and the foot on fire, the old remedy was a bitter, medicinal water drawn from it, and it truly did quiet the swelling and the pain. Benjamin Franklin, tortured by gout, sent across the ocean for a famous bottle of it. But here is the hard truth. People learned the cruel way. The whole plant is a poison. The line between the dose that eases the foot and the dose that kills is razor thin, and people died reaching for relief. And yet the story does not end in the graveyard. Chemists drew the active poison out of this very flower and tamed it into a measured pill, and it is still the medicine doctors give for a gout attack today, so never brew this one. Respect it from a distance. The flower that eased the gouty foot became the drug, and the raw plant remains a killer. Number 6, the butcher's broom. It earned its odd name honestly. The butchers bundled the stiff, spiny little shrub into brooms to scour their blocks clean, and the very same plant, the root of it, was one of the oldest leg remedies in the Mediterranean world. Your grandmother, or her grandmother before her, dug the root and simmered it for the swelling and the heaviness that pulled in the legs and ankles after a long day on the feet. The compounds in that root tighten the slack, tired veins and push the standing blood to move again. This is ancient, more than 2,000 years old, and today Europe's own medicines authority lists the root in plain and cautious words for the discomfort and heaviness of legs. She had no monograph. She had a spiny hedge in a pot, and she knew that when her legs felt like lead, this was the root to dig. Number 5, the red vine leaf. Where your family kept vines, nothing was ever wasted, and in autumn, when the grape leaves turned deep blood red, they were gathered and dried and steeped for the legs, not the fruit, not the wine. The leaf. A wine country grandmother brewed it for the tired, heavy legs that came from standing all day through the harvest, for the swollen ankles and the dull throb by nightfall. The red pigment and the plant compounds in that leaf tone the tired vein walls and coax the blood back up toward the heart against the long pull of gravity. The trials that were run on that leaf are real, and they were run for exactly this, the heavy, aching legs of people who stand all day at their work. She had no trial. She had a hedge of vines in a pot, and she knew which leaf to pick when her legs would not stop aching. The vineyard fed her twice. Look at what keeps happening on this list. The good ones were quietly right, and the shelf knows it. The roadside weed became warfarin, the gouty flower became colchicine, and the whole vein aisle at the pharmacy is not selling you anything new. It is selling you these: horse chestnut in a capsule, rutin in a tablet, vine leaf in a soft gel. The plant she brewed for pennies, cleaned up, standardized, renamed, and sold back to you at a steep markup. She grew the molecule in the yard. The industry only bottled it. Remember that as the last 4 arrive. Number 4, the bilberry. Your grandmother gathered the small blue-black berries at the end of summer and put them up as jam and dark cordial, and there was an old saying that they were good for the eyes and good for the blood. But the use that matters here was for the legs. The deep color in that little berry is the medicine. Those pigments settle into the walls of the smallest, most fragile blood vessels in the legs and firm them up, so a leg that ached and leaked and swelled and bruised held itself together better. European doctors were steeping that berry for weak, ropey, varicose legs long before there was ever a pill for it. It is a comfort and a support for the veins, not a cure for a ruined one. But the cordial she poured over a winter pudding was the very same dark stuff a clinic would later press into a capsule and sell for the very same legs. Number 3, the buckwheat. It was a poor family's grain, ground into the dark pancakes and the porridge your great-grandmother made when the money ran thin. But the same plant, steeped as a tea from its flowering tops, was a leg remedy, and it hid a real secret. Buckwheat is one of the richest sources of a compound the early scientists were so struck by that they briefly called it vitamin P. The P stood for permeability because the compound does one clear and useful thing. It goes to the walls of the smallest, most fragile blood vessels in the legs and strengthens them so they stop leaking and bruising and letting the ankles swell. This was named and studied back in the 1940s, inside your grandmother's own lifetime. Now here is the honest part. A gentle cup of the tea carries far less of it than the doses the scientists measured out, so treat it as a quiet daily support and not a cure. The molecule was real. The poor woman's grain had been carrying it the whole time, free, in the field behind the house. Number 2, the sweet clover. It grew wild along every roadside and fence line, and when it dried, it smelled of fresh hay and vanilla. Your great-grandmother cut it, dried it in the shed, and steeped it for the legs that swelled and grew heavy, and for centuries that is all it was, a sweet common weed for tired, puffy ankles and aching legs. Then the strangest thing on this whole list happened. When that same sweet clover was left to spoil and ferment, the pleasant compound inside it changed into something powerful, a substance that thinned the blood so far that cattle eating the moldy hay bled to death in the fields. In the 1940s, a chemist chased that mystery all the way down, and out of a spoiling roadside weed came warfarin, the blood thinner that has sat in medicine cabinets and hospitals ever since. So treat it with respect and never near a blood thinner, because it truly is one. The weed your great-grandmother steeped for her heavy legs went on to become one of the most important medicines in the world. She just knew it as the sweet grass by the road. Number 1, the horse chestnut. Every autumn, children filled their pockets with the glossy brown conkers that dropped from the tree in the yard, useless as toys. But your grandmother gathered them too, and she knew what to do with them that the children did not. She prepared the nut with care and made from it the drink she kept for the worst days, when her legs were swollen and aching and heavy and would not rest. This is the one science backs the hardest. The largest review of all the trials, gathered by the Cochrane researchers who weigh such evidence, found the horse chestnut seed eases the pain and swelling of poor circulation in the legs. And here is the whole story of this list in a single nut. The raw conker is a poison. Eaten straight, it can kill, which is why it must be prepared with care, and why the safe version is the one now sold back in that pharmacy. The child's plaything, the grandmother's medicine, and the drugstore's bottle were the same brown nut all along. She was never behind the times. She held the front of them in a chipped cup for free. None of this was invented for a warm feeling. Every drink on this list was a real household practice, written down in the old herbals and the drug formularies, and nearly every one of them is being steeped, cleaned up, and sold back to you right now for the price of a name on a bottle. She did not have the trials. She had the plants, the pot, and a lifetime of watching what eased a tired, aching pair of legs at the end of a long day. And she was honest about what a cup could and could not do, which is more than the miracle labels ever were. So go and ask. Find the oldest person you know and ask what they brewed when their legs ached and their ankles swelled before there was an aisle at the pharmacy for it. Some of these are still growing out there, in the yard, in the hedge, along the road, and I want to know which. Tell me in the comments which of these your grandmother kept and which one your family still makes.